Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Words of Art podcast. I am your host, Dion Sanchez, and joining me in this particular episode is Brian Sachetta. Did I say it
right? I kind of primed you in the wrong direction. It was one of those, don't say it this way, say it this way. So it's Sachetta, but no hard feelings.
I had it in my head.
I led you astray.
Darn it. I was close. Brian, see, I'm worried I'm going to keep saying it wrong now. Either way, I'm sorry for saying it wrong. Thank you for joining me, Brian.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, Brian, if you could tell my audience a bit about yourself and your unique last name that I am so close to saying right, that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. So, Brian Sachetta, author, blogger, owner of Get Out of Your Head, which is both a brand and a book series focused on helping folks overcome various mental illnesses such as anxiety and depression. So on my website, I've got a blog where, I'm just kind of cranking out posts that ideas that come to mind, things that I think could be helpful. It'll either be like ideas that I thought of in my own life that I'm like, hey, this was an insight or a breakthrough I had, so I want to share it with other folks. Or, somebody may come to me and say like, hey, could you write about this specific topic? What are some things that might be helpful in this specific domain? So maybe they'll prompt me and then I'll write a post on it. But the idea with the blog is just to, provide insights to folks in the mental health realm. And then I also write my books. So I've got 2 books out. The first one is on living with and overcoming anxiety. And the second one is it's basically, navigating depression. So both books are titled Get Out of Your Head. One is volume 1, one is volume 2. And those are out there. And, I've gotten some interesting messages from folks in the sense of like helping them overcome these 2 diseases or manage them a little bit more effectively. So that's been awesome. One of the reasons why I write is because I've dealt with both things in my own life, and I want to take the lessons that I've learned and, share the struggles and make folks feel as though they're not alone, and then be able to help them feel as though they can get through the difficulties that they go through a little bit more easily.
Awesome. And I truly admire that, because it's really a key factor to why I started this podcast to begin with, is to share experience and stories from others, or my own personal stories, to help others realize they're not alone in this, that everyone goes through the same thing, and maybe at different times, but it's the same basic scenario, and that we all should help each other. So I am curious, because you said the title of your book is Get Out of Your Head, which, as someone who's very much in their head 40 or 80, 90% of the time, why name it Get Out of Your Head, or that particular title? And I know you explained a bit as to what it's about, but do you share your own personal stories, or is it just like steps and suggestions? Like what's your book focus on really?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start with the name itself. I was on a podcast last night and we were talking about the background. It was basically just like I had come up with the first manuscript, for the first book. And I'm sitting there in a coffee shop and I'm trying to think to myself, like, what is a good title for this, right? Because, obviously a book has to have a title, and I need to make it so that it's relevant and it makes sense based on the content that's in the book. And I just kind of thought like, okay, if I were to boil down everything into like a tagline or one sentence or something like that, then that could theoretically be the title. So it just made sense to me. Like it was one of those things where it just kind of popped into my head. It was like, I just said, get out of your head. Right. And then the subtitle is a toolkit for living with and overcoming anxiety. And so that felt a little bit more descriptive to me and relevant to the content itself, where, since I had already written like the first draft, I was able to step back and say to myself, like, if somebody were to pick this up, like what title could I provide that makes it compelling for them, right? And describes the contents within it. And so the book itself is meant to be basically like a plethora of different strategies that I provide to folks. And it's not meant to be one of those things where it's like, hey, this is the only, ABC is the only solution, or this one specific strategy is the only thing that will work. In kind of I guess what in relation to the title itself, I wanted to provide that toolkit, right? So I wanted to say, here are a lot of different strategies that I'm going to throw at you. Why don't you take the ones that resonate with you the most and then create your own quote unquote toolkit, right? So the next time you find yourself in an anxious situation, you can pull out some of those strategies and say like, hey, these are the ones that work for me. They resonate with me. I've used them in the past, or I'm intrigued by them. I want to use them in the future. So that was kind of the goal there. And again, it's like, in that manuscript, I do mention to folks like, I'm not trying to say that I have the one solution or anything like that. It's like some of the strategies will resonate with different people. So it was important that I get that message across to say like, this is, the process of building your own toolkit through some of these strategies. And if you want to add your own tools to them later on, or you've already come into the book with some of them already, then feel free to do that. So I know that was the first question. Can you remind me what the second question was?
I'm too into my head to listening that I forgot what the other question was, but can we pause? So what I wanted to ask you is, considering we're in this pandemic season, which is really devastating, has brought a lot of unfortunate emotions and ramifications, also good ones as well, but a great brunt of it has been negative, unfortunately. Do you find people utilizing your books and the strategies you've implemented more, or exactly how has your book been helpful during this season, you feel?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, it's hard for me. Like, I don't necessarily have the analytics in terms of like, this many people found it effective during this particular period. But I will say that the first book, especially with that one having been out for about 3 years now already, it's done pretty well in terms of sales during the pandemic. And it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, of course, like as an author, like I want to get my message out there. And if that means selling more books, that's amazing. But at the same time, like I really just want to help folks, right? So it's not really like, oh, hey, I sold X number of copies and I'm, so proud of the achievement or whatever. It's like, sure, there is an aspect of pride to it, but it's mostly wanting to help folks. So even if that means, giving some of the content away for free sometimes, doing a coaching call with somebody where I don't charge anything or whatever. It's like at the end of the day, I'm trying to just inspire as many folks as I can, provide help and hope to as many folks as I can. And obviously my time is limited, but I try to do what I can with the time that I have. In regards to the actual pandemic, I mean, I definitely have received a decent amount of messages from folks on like Instagram and Facebook Messenger and whatnot. Folks just saying like, hey, thank you so much for this book. It really helped me, talked about their own personal situations. And then I also have some evidence of just like folks that have left reviews. And I had one person who reached out and said like, this was one of the best books I've ever read. It actually helped me in my marriage. I was thinking about getting divorced and, it changed my perspective and whatnot. So, as I talk about these things, it's like, I love getting those messages. Those are amazing. But at the same time, like I try to curb them back a little bit because I don't want to sound like I'm tooting my own horn here. Right. It's like, it's really just trying to help folks. And so, kind of talking about the pandemic itself, right? The harsh effects of it. I think the largest one or the most obvious one is just like, if you have like COVID itself, if you have lost somebody to COVID, if you have dealt with the struggles of like, the uncertainty of somebody going to the hospital or something like that. And obviously it's just this scary situation where, I think it's a little bit different today than it was in March of 2020, when it was like, we had no information on this disease. We didn't have any methods by which we could really fight it. Nobody was really giving us too many good points and a ton of direction on this thing. I think we can feel a little bit safer now, right? Because it's like, okay, we understand how this thing transmits a tiny bit. People who want to get vaccinated can get vaccinated and feel good about that. And some antiviral stuff is starting to come out on the market. But on the other side of that, it's like, we can't deny the reality that we're living in this world where like, we just aren't seeing as many people in person. We aren't interacting as often face to face. There's still a lot of like, divisive news that plays on our TVs and radio stations or podcasts or whatever it is every day, right? Through the media. So there's definitely a lot of things that are adding to the amount of stress that we're feeling and taking away from, I don't know, maybe like our quote unquote humanity, right? And so I've written a few posts that folks have found helpful over the course of the pandemic, just like, hey, these are specific ways to think about, reframe the pandemic, reframe the fact that, hey, we might be locked down, but like there are still things we can do to improve our mental state, to change our state of mind, boost our mood. And, it's one of those things where it's like, I provide those strategies. And again, I'm trying to help folks as best I can. But I think I also try to provide a little bit of a human element where it's not to be like, hey, just do X, Y, Z and you'll be all better, right? It's like, we need to acknowledge sort of the elephant in the room and be like, hey, this is a difficult thing that we're all going through. It's no fun to be in our houses locked down by ourselves, depending on where we are in the world or what state and, the regulations where we live. And so a lot of those things add up and take a toll on our mental health, right? But that's not to say that we can't do things to fight back a little bit. So, I'm just trying to provide those strategies to folks as this pandemic goes along. And, sometimes easier said than done, or easier in some instances than others. But, it's like, if we think about it, right, if I were to say, what are some of the best strategies that we could put out there? It's like, just make sure to get exercise, right? It's like, we're locked in our houses. We're sitting on our couches all day. When we're sitting down, that's like, it's such an easy time for us to get into our heads and ruminate over things, especially if we have the TV on and the news is on and, the anchors are making us all scared about another variety of the another variant of the virus itself and whatnot. So it's like, remember to stay active. When you get active, you're you kind of get back into your body and you leave that space of rumination in your head where you're just chewing over thoughts all day. So I think that's really important. And then, just being able to turn off the news every once in a while and say, hey, I've got my daily dose here. Like, I'm not going to let these things scare me anymore. I know what's going on in the world. I don't necessarily need to hear this again and again and again. And so those are just a couple things, but I think they can be helpful for folks. So that's the message that I've been trying to put forth.
Awesome. And I know you have probably many strategies and you're not claiming to be an expert, but you at least want to express the steps that, or at least you would find helpful to others depending on the situation. Do you have any strategies that you can mention off the top of your head? Although I'm sure your brain is get out of your head for a reason, but if you can state or mention any of your strategies to my audience right now, do you mind?
Yeah. So I think the question is like, strategies for getting out of your head. Is that sort of the question that's being posed?
Yes.
Sure. Yeah. So what I like to do, right, is I give a little bit of background on the framework that I'm going to introduce. So in the first half of my first book, I have this thing called the 10 steps to getting out of your head. And it's just like a simple framework, a 10-part a 10-part list that I lay out in the book. And it becomes kind of the skeleton for that first half of the book, where basically what I do is I say, hey, I tell personal stories and introduce it and say, like, I was in this anxious situation in the past. It made me really nervous. I didn't know what to do. I spent so much time chewing this thing over. And then eventually one day I said to myself, like, I've read all these different books. I've listened to podcasts. I've read these different journal articles and whatnot. And just one day I kind of did a brain dump and I said, let me just write down everything that either I've heard before or I have come up with for myself in terms of dealing with my anxiety. And once I did that, with a little bit of refinement, I ended up calling the things that I wrote down the 10 steps to getting out of your head. And so that, again, is just this simple list that says, like, here are 10 simple and effective strategies that you can leverage when you're feeling really fearful. So we could jump into a couple of them. Do you think that would be helpful?
Yes, I think that would be really helpful.
Okay, cool. So I like to switch it up a little bit in terms of talking about these things, just because I find that, I'll go on a podcast, I'll talk about the same 2 steps. I'll go on another podcast, I'll do the same exact thing. Okay. So I'm gonna name the first 3, and then I'm gonna jump into the third one. And if you want, we can go back and we can talk in more detail about any of them. But the first one is just to breathe. It's a very simple strategy, and it's almost like hilariously obvious, right? Because it's like, if somebody walks up to you and is like, "Hey, you're nervous, you should breathe." Like, you might even get, like, I would get a little bit defensive. I'd be like, "Yeah, obviously I should breathe, right?" But in the book, I talk about the science behind it, and the fight or flight system, and why it's important, why deep breathing can help us get out of our heads, get back to calm. The second step is determine the true importance of what's making you anxious. The idea there is like, when we get wrapped up in our fears, we can sometimes, we can almost like build so much fear on top of the original trigger that we lose sight of what it is that we're afraid of, right? So like, let's say we have an interview tomorrow or something. We might start thinking about that interview, and then like an hour later, we feel so awful, as if like the world is coming to an end, right? And this step is basically just to say that if it's helpful, look at what it is that's making you fearful and remind yourself of it. So that way, maybe, you can go from this like, oh my goodness, the world really does feel like it's ending, down to like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I'm nervous and I am worried about whatever it is that I need to do or I'm going to do. But it's not necessarily as bad as I'm making it out to be in my head. The tough part about this step is that this is not to say like, hey, I'm trying to downplay what anyone is going through. A lot of these steps, again, with the toolkit vibe, it's like, if something is helpful for you, if one of the strategies that I put forth is beneficial, then use it. And if not, it's not meant to be like offensive or anything like that. You can just calmly move to the next step. And so the third one, and this was the one that I said that maybe we could dive into a little bit in further detail here, and that's evaluate the potential outcomes and reconnect to the one you want. And so what I talk about in the book with this strategy is like, so for example, right, let's say that we're going to a job interview tomorrow, and we've gotten like really far in our heads about it. We're super nervous, like, are we going to get the job? What happens if we show up and we have a panic attack in the office? What happens if, we forget what to say, or they ask us a specific question and we just totally botch the question? And so what can happen is like, we start from the standpoint of like, okay, I have this job interview tomorrow and I want to do well on it, so that I get the job offer and I can work for the company that I want to work for, right? And then once we our brain kind of goes into like survival or what if mode, and all of a sudden we're thinking like, what if I do this? What if I do that? What if I mess up? What if they hate me? Whatever. And so this one is similar to the previous step, the second one that I mentioned, which is basically we can blow our fears out of proportion. Is like, it might be a strong way to put it. Again, I'm trying not to be offensive here, but we can blow our, for lack of another way of saying it, it's like we can blow our fears out of proportion. And so this step, which is, again, just to repeat it, evaluate the potential outcomes and reconnect to the one you want. It's to say like, hey, after an hour or 2 hours of really turning this thing over in my mind and being so fearful, just pause and say, hey, what is it that I really want in this situation? I've been thinking about what I don't want to happen for so long that it's almost as if I've forgotten what I do want to happen, and I've forgotten that could actually occur. So in the case of a job, a scary job interview, right, one that makes us fearful, we might forget that we could actually go and perform well in the interview and then get the job. The reason, so many of these stories, like the reason why I wrote the book, and the reason, the stories behind these steps that I lay out, they're all like related to things that I've gone through in my own life, or situations that I've been in, right? And so it was like me basically saying like, hey, I know that I've done this a ton of times, where it's like I'm going into this thing and I'm almost in defense mode. I'm like, okay, what scary thing is coming my way? Let me kind of like defend it off, right? But sometimes I find that after a scary situation, I kind of sit down and I'm like, wait, why was I so defensive? Like, why was I focusing on the things that I didn't want to happen? Why didn't I say to myself like, oh, even though I'm simplifying things, and I'm not trying to downplay anxiety, it was like, why didn't I just say to myself like, I wanted that thing, and like I should have just either focused on it or put it in my mind really quickly, and then just went off and did the interview, and kind of let the chips fall with it where they may, right? So that was kind of the story behind that one. And then I tell a funny anecdote. Well, at least I think it's funny. But so like in race car driving, there's kind of this notion of like new race car drivers, when their cars spin out on the track, they will tend to focus. They'll put their eyes on the wall and they'll say like, hey, that wall is super scary. I don't want to crash into it. I don't want to wreck my car. So I'm focusing on it. And I'm going to use all my might to navigate myself away from it. And the ironic thing is that most of the folks who do that end up crashing into the wall. And so the story or the anecdote in the book is basically to say, like, don't be a newbie race car driver and focus on where you don't want to go, because that's where you're going to end up. Focus on where you'd like to go if you can, if it's helpful and if it makes sense for you. Focus on the metaphorical infield, right? Guide your car back to the safe zone, if you will. So those are a few of the strategies. Hope that they're helpful.
I think they're very helpful. I particularly like the first step, which is to breathe. I tell my friends all the time, don't forget to breathe, because I find breathing to be important. Yet I don't breathe enough. Yet I find it important to implement that into them. Therefore, it can have a reverse reaction and force me to breathe because I'm giving that same particular advice. So yes, I find those steps and what you mentioned in the whole race car analogy to be a wonderful description to what you were explaining. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So we're gonna drive into the fun segment of my show, and that is the icebreaker segment. So we're going to start with the icebreaker question. Although you're an author, so I feel like you're going to do good at this question a little too well. But I ask it anyhow. So if you had to come up with a title or chapter for where your life is at right now, although I know you already have a book called Get Out of My Head, but if you can come up with a different one, that would be just as great, or whatever pops into your head. Again, that's the joys of this question. If you had to come up with a title or chapter for where your life is currently at this precise moment, what would it be?
That's a good question. I'm tempted to say, something as simple as like figuring it out, right? In the sense that I feel pretty good about where I am in my life, but everybody has their ups and downs and their struggles and their challenges and whatnot. But I feel as though I'm quote unquote figuring it out from a standpoint of like, I feel more confident than I did 10 years ago. Like I can take on life's challenges, even though I don't necessarily know what all those challenges are going to be. So I'm kind of figuring it out as I go. And it's one of those things, right, where it's like, yeah, I have a couple books published and, like some nice reviews on Amazon. I've sold a handful of books and whatnot, but like, I think there's sometimes this misnomer or whatever of like, a quote unquote author is like, they're rich and famous and whatever. And it's like, I'm just a dude, right? And it's like, I write about the things that I like to write about. I try to help folks. I make a tiny bit of money on my books, but the money isn't that important to me. And I'm just trying to, again, figure out like, where's the author journey taking me? I'm trying to figure out, who else can I help? What other message can I put forth that I think would be beneficial? And so it's like, I'm trying to figure out some of the things in my own life with a cool and calm head where I can then turn and be like, hey, listeners, followers, readers, like, here are some of the next things that I wanted to share with you. So that was kind of the first thing that popped in my head, but that's what I got going on.
That's a wonderful answer to this question. And it's probably my favorite question to ask because it's something people don't anticipate. So I think that's a wonderful answer because we're all still figuring out life and we have no clue what we're doing. Yet when we get to that point, it turns out great as long as we not focus on the wall, which is now going to be stuck in my head for the rest of the week, that analogy.
Yeah, that's a great tie-in. And I think, just last thing to wrap up there, I think it's important to kind of mention that like, not too many people have it all figured out. I think that is both the slightly scary thing about life and also the fun part, right? It's like, if we knew everything and there were no other questions that were open, it would be like, well, what do we do now? We're kind of bored, right? So part of it is in embracing that a little bit and having some fun with it to the degree that we can.
Absolutely. So this is the part where I explain my answer. The title and chapter for where my life is at right now or currently would be to be a warrior for change. I've gone through quite a gamut of stuff in my life, not all great, quite a majority of it's health wise, which I can go into later, but I've gone through a lot and I feel like being a warrior is really represents and just symbolizes who I am at this current point in time, what I've gone through in my life, and what I will continue to go through from this point forward. So
that's great. And I think it's super, super honorable and just like a really great thing, right? To be able to say, hey, I've been through difficulty, but I'm not going to let it destroy me. I'm not going to let it drag me down, right? I'm going to try to take what I've been through, share it with other folks, inspire some other folks, take some of that pain and harness and channel it into something good.
Yes, absolutely. So on to the icebreaker game, which is my favorite part because it puts my guests out of their mindset. So that makes it all the more fun. Let me make sure I have everything ready. Let me make sure. Okay, so the icebreaker game is called Song Association. You don't have to be an avid singer. You could be a shower singer, a backyard singer, any type of singer you want. You don't have to be an expert. That's the joys of this game. So pretty much how it works is I give you a word and you can either sing it, rap it. It has to be an actual song. You can't make it up. Many of my guests have tried to make up songs, particularly in the last episode. So you can't make up a song. It has to be an actual song. It can either be in the title or in the lyrics. And also, it can't be based off the word I give you, it can't be a name of an artist. I know many artists have really unique names. It can't be the name of the artist either. So, so it's 3 words. However, and this is where your brain likes to play tricks on you, you have 15 seconds based off the word I give you to either sing it, rap it. It's either in the title or in the lyrics. So.
Just to recap the instructions, you'll give me a phrase. I'll think of a pre-existing song that has that phrase in it already, and then I'll sing that.
Yes.
Okay. Put me on the spot, but hey, I'm game.
Awesome. And I just changed the last word just for you. So just make it all the more fun. So the first word is heart.
Heart. Okay. I mean, first thing that comes to mind is that would be NSYNC, tearing up my heart.
Okay.
So I guess I have to sing it.
Yeah. Even though the timer's about to go off, I would still sing it because I know that it is an actual physical song, but I still think you should sing it.
All right. Well, it's I'm not a good singer, but it's you're tearing up my heart when I'm with you. There you go.
See, it's a fun game. And I wouldn't have thought you would give NSYNC. I was thinking you would give another, because there's many songs that pertain to the word heart.
Yeah, I'm a 90s kid, so.
See, we're good friends already. Okay, so the next word is words. And it can be word too, abbreviation of that as well. So.
Got it. Ooh. It's, the fact that it's just one word, I feel like is stumping me more than maybe like a phrase. Something like I can't find the words to say. I just made that up, but.
Well, I can give you the answer that many guests have given. It wouldn't count for you though.
Okay.
But some guests have given the answer more than words by the band Extreme. Although I know another artist that covers that song, which is more conducive to our time period, I feel. So,
all right.
So the last word that I changed just for you, I'm pretty sure there's a song pertaining to this word, but I'm not entirely sure. But that's the fun of this game. So the last word is head.
Okay. Yeah, I think the fact that it's one, like I have to pull out one word. Let me think. Who sings the song? It's like, can't get you out of my head.
Wow.
What is that song? That's from like maybe 2000 or something. It's a female singer.
It is a female singer. Wow. I just changed the word like 5 seconds ago, and you were able to come up with a song before the timer went off. I'm impressed. You weren't
I
even
listen to a lot of music, so
so that's the wow, I'm really impressed for that. You were able to come up with a song correlating to that word. But anyhow, that was the game. Thank you for participating. I hope you had fun.
yeah, it was fun.
Of course, we can keep talking about music all day long because I love music as well. But unfortunately, we're at the end of this winding road, which I'm pretty sure is a song somewhere also. Before we wrap up here, do you have any social links where people can find your book? Is your book going to turn into a movie someday? Give us the inside scoop as to how my audience can get in touch with you.
Yeah, sure. So my website is getoutofyourhead.com, and that is all one word, no spaces or dashes or anything like that. On Instagram, if you want to get a hold of me, the handle is currently Get Out of Your Head Books. And again, no spaces, dashes. It's possible that that changes in the future. I do have a trademark application that's going through the works right now. So in the future, if I'm able to get the trademark, then it would be Get Out of Your Head rather than Get Out of Your Head Books. I do have a small Facebook page where I tend to post updates as well. So that's facebook.com/Get Out of Your Head Books. Kind of same thing on the name there. Could change in the future. We'll see what happens. I don't think that the books will become movies, but hey, you never know. It's kind of one of those things where if you sell enough books and it gets popular enough, you never know what could happen. So yeah, like I had mentioned, I've written 2 books so far. So the first title is Get Out of Your Head, a toolkit for living with and overcoming anxiety. And the second book is called Get Out of Your Head, Volume 2, Navigating the Abyss of Depression. In the future, like it's kind of one of those things where I have vague plans to write a third one, especially because like this is my brand and I have this trademark that's going through the works for this book series. And I just, I love to share my insights, and I don't think I'm done with the messages yet, but I am still trying to figure out what the topic of that third book would be and what the manuscript would look like. So
it could be figuring it out. That could be the third book.
could be. Yeah. See how things go.
Absolutely. Thank you again for joining me, Brian. I was going to drive me crazy because I messed up your last name, but thank you for joining me. This was a wonderful conversation, truly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Dion. And no hard feelings on the last name. It is one of the harder ones that you'll see. So and some folks say Sir Cheddar as a way to remember it.
See, I'm worried
like cheddar cheese.
Cheddar. See, I'm worried about messing it up even further.
No worries. Don't do it if you don't want to. So.
No worries. To my audience, thank you for joining this on this latest episode of the Words of Heart podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, if you want to like it, subscribe it, here are the following ways to do so. We are on Facebook at the Words of Heart podcast. We are also on YouTube under the same name. And of course, you can listen to me wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, Google. If you can listen to it on the moon, let me know. I'm still trying to manifest that into fruition because I think intergalactic broadcasting would be cool. But until then, if you want to let me know how you enjoy this episode, you can do so on social media as well. I am HeartWarrior24 on Twitter and HeartWarrior25 on Instagram. So again, stay healthy, stay safe, stay away from the wall, get out of your own head, just get out of your head. It's okay, you'll be fine. Woo-sa and breathe. And until next time, bye.